Hello everyone, this is Grandmaster Ahmed Al-Khatib, and in this video we will discuss the Caro-Kann defense, e4 c6, and we will talk about the main line after d4, d5, knight c3 or knight d2. We will talk about the advanced Caro-Kann, after d5, e5. We will talk about the what's so-called maybe bishop's opening, Magnus' opening, or Fischer's opening, which is bishop d3. It's kind of well known. And there's the fantasy variation, f3. And there's the Panov attack after ED-CD, c4. And we will talk about, or a bit about, this idea of d3, knight f3 early on. So first of all, why to choose the Caro-Kann? Actually, Caro-Kann is a smart decision to play against e4. First of all, it's not too solid and it's not too dangerous. What do I mean? For example, e6 and e5, it's actually too solid. It's not easy to win if white wanted to choose a kind of solid structure or practical structure, practical idea. And in the meantime, there are too many theories. Like after, for example, e5, too many theories: f4, d4, knight f3, Italian, Spanish, Scotch, etc., etc. e6 is kind of passive opening, though it's solid. You can have it in your arsenal, but I don't recommend to only have it. While, for example, the Sicilians and the Perk or Alekhine or the other stuff, it's kind of active defenses, but risky in the meantime. So that will lead us to the Caro-Kann. Caro-Kann, it's not too aggressive and it's not too solid. So it's kind of a mix. So it's a smart decision, and I recommend you trying this and adding this to your arsenals, weapons against e4. So let's start with the advanced variation. Probably this is the variation I like the most, and I have tried this online too many games, and I do believe Jobava's Jobava likes this line too much. d4, d5, e5, and now we go bishop f5. There's this the other idea of c5, but it's fine. We'll stick to this, and most played move by white is knight f3, and after e6, bishop e2, and now too many theories, like too many ideas. Knight d7 with knight e7, with the queens, with long side castling, or c5 early on with too many theories, c4 without c4. So here I choose this idea, which is knight e7. What? Okay, knight e7 might be a transposition. Wait a second. After castling, the point is to play knight g6 here. Looks weird, right? Bishop f5, knight g6, I moved the knight twice in the opening, but it's a closed center. And in a closed center, you have the ability to do that, so it's not a problem. And the main idea of this, after c3, to early go for f6. Attack on e5 once, twice. If your opponent agree and took the pawn, then thank you. We thank him or her, and we take here, followed by simply bishop d6, knight d7, castling short, rook a to e8, e5. Very easy, very smooth way of developing the pieces. Great. What if my opponent did not agree? Then I add more pressure. Knight d7 is enough probably. Yeah, knight d7, and then he has to take. Otherwise, I could take and play bishop c5 somewhere, and this is going to be a weak pawn. So at the end of the day, he has to take it. Another idea to keep in mind here, because sometimes knight d2 is played, you do have the idea of knight f4 simply, and pick up this bishop, having the bishop pair, and enjoy the rest of the game. Or you can stick to the main idea, which is f6c. It's very easy to learn, very practical. Go try it out. So this is for the advanced variation. Let's go back to the main line, probably I don't want to say the most played line. Too many players try to change from time to time. So d4, d5, and knight c3 or knight d2. This is what's interesting about the Caro-Kann. Knight c3 or knight d2, d takes e4. And after knight takes e4, we go with it's kind of not trendy, but it's probably the latest kind of discovery of Caro-Kann, knight f6. And after knight takes f6, e takes f6. By the way, you might check this for later and to surprise your opponents. So e takes f6, and now c3. Why c3? Because d3 is the best placement for the bishop. If bishop d3 right now, maybe this is an idea. That's why c3 first. Okay, we go bishop d6, and now after bishop d6, bishop d3 is played. By the way, as we are here, I remember an idea I wanted to share. If bishop c4 is played, then this is not the best move, though it might be one of the best moves, but I do like this idea here, knight a6. First of all, if he takes, then queen a5 check, and you can pick up the bishop. No need to double the pawns, even though if you double the pawns, you're completely fine. You have the b file, you have this diagonal with a5, bishop a6, etc. So you're completely fine. So let's go back. Why knight a6? We're delaying the improvement of this bishop, and follow that by knight c7. And whenever the check came, I can cover with the bishop. So now bishop d6 is available, and if rook e1, then bishop e6. And if he takes, you can take with the bishop. For sure, d5 is not there because take, and now black to play, and when? Simply bishop takes h2, exactly, and then queen takes d5. So this is an idea I remembered right now, and I decided to share. Why not bishop d6 right away? Because it's not annoying, but I mean, either you go back bishop e7 and you lose a move, or you go queen e7. And sometimes we don't like to go earlier in the end games, especially when our opponent wants to do that. I don't want to do what you wanted to do. So after he takes f6, c3, and now we go bishop d6, bishop d3, and we simply castling. After castling, queen c2 is the most played move and the most principled one, attacking on h7, and now rook e8 check. Knight e2 to cover that and keeping options open, and now we go with the trendy move h5, thanks to modern engines. By the way, h6 is another idea you might try, and I do believe f5 makes some sense. So h5, and after h5, two main ideas for white here, either to go for short castling or to go for long castling. Let's get started with the long castling, the move that I like most for black, not for white. After bishop e3, first of all, I look at my king like this, because my king will be here if you play OTB game, and I will say, no worry, you feel alone, your h-pawn like betrays you, but we're coming. Knight d7, and we play knight f8. And after knight f8, you are completely safe. The king cannot be attacked further. Now king b1 has to be played because bishop e6 is there, and now my plan is very interesting. I'll go bishop e6, followed by b5, a5, either move the bishop with the queen d5 or take whatever here and go to d5, especially if it's a knight. So after bishop e6, for example, white will go h3. I go b5. By the way, this is a typical move, and you might say, oh, wait a second, but I don't like to weaken my pawns. Yes, this pawn is weak, but this is not how chess is played. Chess is not about not making weaknesses. Chess is about, can my opponent make use of these weaknesses or not? And in this case, it's not, because the c file is closed. And most importantly, we do have the opposite side castling. So who attacks wins, not who has weaknesses. It's not a very calm position. It's not complicated, but it's an aggressive one. So after b5, for example, g4, you wanted to you wanted me to cooperate, take, and then bishop h7. No, I'm not interested. I simply go h4 and continue my attack. For example, knight f4, as we said, we take, and after queen d5, there is b3. So we anticipated this, and we go simply a5, and after a5, we continue, for example, the attack after queen d5, b3. There are ideas like a4, and continue the attack, attacking the king here with the rook and the queen and the bishop. And this knight makes this king feel safer. Sometimes after g5, you could simply go f5, and you're completely safe. So this is for the long castling. After h5, if your opponent decided to castle long, and maybe if your opponent doesn't know this line exactly, he will try to punish you, like, what's this h5? And after short castling, knight g3, it's kind of an annoying idea, so it's better to stop it first. And second, after h4, we kind of threatening h3. Now later on, like h3, g3, queen d5, sometimes threatening mate in one. And believe me, sometimes, somewhere, somehow, it might be not able to be prevented. I mean, the checkmate. So after h4, h3 is the principled move. And now again, we look at our king and we say, hello, our king, you're completely safe. No worry. Your pawn betrays you, but we're there with the knight. So knight d7, bishop f4. Exchanging the bishops. No, I'm not interested. I go knight f8. If you wanted to take, I take. And now queen d2, we could go knight g6. I mean, here in this position, I wanted you to understand something. There's this theory of like 4 against 3 and white will exchange everything and will enter endings and having a pawn up. This is just a theory, and it's not only a theory, it's something that you can only talk about, you cannot see. Why? Because there's no forced way, exact way to exchange every single piece here. Second, if these pawns pushed, most likely they will be weakened, and there's a big chance one of these pawns will be weakened or will be like captured. For example, if c4, d4 pawn will be too weakened. I mean, after bishop e6, rook d8, rook d7, rook d8, and then move the bishop away, and the knight e6, attack, every single piece will attack the d4 square. This is an idea. Another idea in this structure I wanted to keep in mind, the idea of having a piece on d5, like knight e6, knight c7, for example, with b5, knight d5. This is actually another very interesting idea to keep in mind how to play this position. And the blockade idea. What do I mean by the blockade? As I told you, like these pawns cannot be easily moved. If he played c4, then it's very tough for the d4 pawn. If nothing, then I can stick and wait. Sometimes another idea, and we finish with this. Sometimes you can actually expand and use the extra pawn on the king side. Like for example, g5, king g7, and later on f5, g4 might be coming, g4, f5, f4, etc. So this extra pawn will make your king safer first. Second, you can use it. Okay, that's actually for the main line as strategical concepts and as moves. So let's now go to the bishop's opening, and this is actually, I have a very nice score against this opening, probably winning every single game. Not every single game. I lost somewhere to Sandy. I forgot his name, Indian Grandmaster. But it was a very interesting game and should be ended in a draw. But I won maybe 5 to 6 games. OTB, I mean. e4, c6, d4, d5, takes, and bishop d3. The philosophy of this variation is to restrict this bishop. Okay, wait a second. This bishop cannot go here. This bishop cannot go here. Please, my opponent, cooperate and play e6, and now I will feel as white happy. So he said no, we go knight f6, and after knight f6 we wanted to go bishop to g4. So our opponent will play bishop f4, for example, knight c6 now, knight c6 threatening knight b4, and after this bishop moves we could go bishop f5. That's why c3 is the most played move, and now we go simply bishop g4 attacking the queen. Queen b3 trying to refute the early improving of the bishop, but simply queen d7 we protect. You go knight d2, I knight d2 because I wanted to go knight f3, but this is actually not okay for white. That's why knight d2 to be played, and now we simply go e6. And what makes it interesting for us is that we could go bishop d6. From afar, white might think it's not possible, but it's actually possible. And now, if your opponent is greedy enough and took the bishop, by the way, if knight e5, you can go simply queen c7 and you're completely fine. And if your opponent greedy enough and take on b7, then his position is very risky and he has to give the pawn back by force, or otherwise he will be losing. Rook b8 first, attacking the queen, queen a6 only move, and now we castle. And in this position, he has to give up this b pawn. Wait a second, don't he have or she before? No, because it's too much, and this king in the center, and when your opponent's king in the center, open it, the center. Rook b6 first, and after, for example, queen a3, we go e5. And after e5, only God knows what's going on here. We're threatening e4 already, and the war is just started while white is not ready. And now e4 is a threat, so you cannot castle. If you take, I'll take back. Now I'm attacking the bishop. Maybe knight c4, maybe knight takes f3, rook e8's coming. What's that? And if you take queen takes, how to castle now in this position? Believe it or not, you're completely losing as white now. That's why this pawn cannot be touched, and believe me, many players will do so. So white, for example, will castle. We will castle as well. And again, now if you take, I could go rook b8 and take on b2. That's why in this position, rook f e1. This is actually the only remaining idea for white, is to play knight e5 and doing something. Now after rook f e1, first of all, we take, and you take back. And then we go queen c7. This is a very deep, interesting move. The idea of this move is to anticipate knight e5, and here I want you to remember this very interesting strategical concept. After knight e5, we take he takes back, and now we go back with our knight attacking. For example, queen c2 attacking on h7, and now, question for you, how to defend the pawn, g6 or h6? Think before you answer. The right answer is, without a doubt, g6. Whenever you play against a bishop and you do have too many pawns, see, it's not one pawn or two, you do have too many pawns, especially after the opening, try to put your pawns on the same color as your opponent bishop, so the bishop will be restricted and light squares will be completely covered. So this is very interesting. And if needed, and I do believe it's not, but if needed, you can use the knight to defend even more. Okay, but am I just sitting down and waiting? First of all, white has a bad idea or a bad indication in his position, which is the space advantage. The space advantage is not, or is a disadvantage when we exchange too many pieces. And here, almost half of the pieces are exchanged. So this is actually a negative, not a positive idea. And our plan is rook b8, b5, b4. What's so-called the minority attack. And we improve the queen side and we come up with the other rook to the game and we have a much easier game. But wait a second. There's something you did not mention. What if my opponent played h3 and said, sorry, my opponent, today I will not allow you to play bishop g4. Please go e6 and make my life happier, easier. I will say, thank you very much for this information, but I have another idea that I will use, which is g6. And my point is to go bishop f5 as early as possible. And if you go knight f3, I go bishop f5. And now if you let me take, then I solve the problem, the main problem of the opening. I'll go bishop g7 castling, having nothing to worry about. And if you take, I take back. And now my idea is not to play bishop g7 because this diagonal is super solid. But my idea is to go e6, bishop d6. And maybe, and there is a big maybe here, queen c7 and castling long and use the g file, especially after this h3 idea. After h3, the g2 square is weakened. g3 idea is no longer a defense. For example, without g3, if we just to understand the structure, I know like it's maybe too advanced, but it's good to mention and it's good to understand it this way. In this position, for example, say c3, g6, this idea is not that great in this position, like bishop f5, because after bishop f5, gf5, whenever you do something on the g file, for example, castling, whenever you do something on the g file, g3 is, I mean, you feel it's a strong move because the pawn here is supported twice, yeah? And maybe you can join with the knight, etc. But after h3 is already played, then g3 square is kind of weakened. So this idea of g6, bishop f5 is great. And as I said, like e6, bishop d6, queen c7, and castling long and use the g file to attack on g2, especially if your opponent, I mean, regardless if he castled short or not, you can attack on the g file. So this is actually what's for the bishop's opening. And now, actually, now you're kind of ready to play the, Caro-Kann, because these are the three critical lines that you need some information, some knowledge before you go there. But the other stuff, not that much. For example, this one was so-called the fantasy variation. Too much theory after take, e5, stuff like this or that. For example, like there's this idea of e5, and if he takes, there's this famous check and take the rook. But we don't play for tricks, and after f3, I do love this move, which is g6. Why this is interesting move? Because who plays f3? He's looking for a very complicated game, a very tactical game, a chaos on the board. No, I'm not interested. I'll go g6, a very calm game, and after knight c3, I go bishop g7, threatening now d takes e4 because the d4 pawn is under fire, and after bishop e3, we simply go queen b6. Remember, this is a key move. And after queen b6, now b2 is under fire. Either you sacrifice it, and I will take it, or you protect it. If you decided to sacrifice it, then you will be thanked. Queen takes b2, rook b1 for sure, and after queen a3, I need you to remember one idea. after ed5, your opponent wishes that you take back, and then all sort of knight b5 will be annoying. No, I'm not interested. I am already a pawn up. I will give it back to you after knight f6. You take, now I take back with the pawn, keeping these two squares under control. And my life now is easy. After bishop d3, I will go castling. You go knight g2 and now knight bd7. Followed by knight b6, bishop a6, and knight bd5 or knight fd5 using the f file, the b file. And black has no problem at all. This queen actually is kind of safe here. And he has a very easy like retreat to the game if it's necessary, which I don't believe it is. So what if after queen b6, rook b1 is played? If rook b1 is played, then simply I could take, and e5, very strong. Making use of the pin, attacking on d4 thrice. Once, twice, thrice. So knight f3 to support that. I go ed4, knight d4, and maybe now knight f5 is an idea. So I simply go queen b4 to get rid of that. After knight b4, bishop b2, knight f6. You castle as white, I castle as black. It seems that white has a better development, maybe faster one, but it's not. Remember this. This is very important. Maybe this is the most useful stuff you're going to hear. It's not about who's faster. It's about who is effective. Is it effective development, or is it just like you collect? Is it quantity or quality? Here's just quantity, because you do have very main problem if in the next 3 to 4 moves white did not or doesn't manage to do anything serious, anything clear, any attack which he doesn't have, then black will go queen, knight d7, knight e5, improve the bishop, bring the rook, and strategically white is going to suffer to the rest of the game, and most likely he or she will lose it. So this is for the fantasy variation. For the Panov attack, I will simply recommend this idea, like after c4, knight f6, knight c3. If you do have time and you do like to study chess, and you're nerd of chess, you could go knight c6, and after this there's that, and too many theories, and like after cd5 or something, cd5, knight d5. I mean, I'm not sure how that line goes. Like there's this, and you take, and I take, and there's check first. Too many complicated stuff, which is not actually the idea of our kind of mini lecture here. I just recommend this idea of g6. If your opponent does nothing, like knight f3, you go bishop g7, and you castle, and whenever this bishop moves, you take it. And play against this isolani. Like, you do have ideas like bishop g4, you do have ideas like b6, bishop b7, you do have ideas like knight b6, knight d7, knight b6, knight d5. Too many ideas, very easy game, you're completely fine, you do not have any problem. One issue with this line is this move after g6, queen b3. Because if you don't know what to do, you might be in trouble. After bishop g7, cd5, and take the pawn and stick to it. I will castle, and now bishop e2. After knight bd7, knight b6 to be coming, but there's this idea of bishop f3. Again, very greedy, very materialistic, completely fine. Go away, I wanted my queen. No, I'm not going back, so knight b6, okay. And now I am attacking 3 times, you're defending 3 times. It seems that you're doing okay, but there's this idea after knight ge2, bishop f5. What's the point of bishop f5? The point of bishop f5 is to play bishop d3 followed by bishop c4 and then take the pawn back. And this is actually the idea. And whenever the pawn is back, white will suffer from the isolated pawn that he has. So this is probably the only idea. Remember it, like bishop f5, bishop d3, bishop c4, and you get your pawn back and you're completely fine. Lastly, we're going to talk about this idea of offering a queen exchange early on, like knight f3. First of all, this is a very interesting rule in chess. Queen takes d1 or queen takes d8 in the opening are not good moves. Technically and psychologically. Why? First of all, this is actually what is your opponent's intention. What your opponent is preparing against you. He knows probably you play Caro-Kann, or for example, he had some lectures or some deep studying about this position, this exact position in the Caro-Kann. And you just help him going there. Okay, show me your opponent what, or show me my opponent what's your knowledge. Why do I want to give him that pleasure, that idea, that helping for free, right? So I don't do that. And for other openings, like for example the Philidor, like d6, d4, knight f6, knight c3, e5, d takes e5, d takes e5, queen d8. This is again not the best attitude. This king here is safe, and most likely if you don't manage to do anything specific here in this position, you might have some issues because this knight is kind of misplaced because of c3. I mean c6, and the knight cannot go here or there. This is for another topic. So that's why after e4, c6, d3, d5, I recommend very simple move, bishop g4. And after bishop g4, my development will be easy. Knight d7, e6, knight f6, bishop d6, castling is kind of a reverse to re-attack. And if h3, I don't want to enter these complications with bishop h5 and then g4 and etc. etc. No, I'm not interested in this. I'll go bishop takes f3, queen takes f3, and knight f6. Yes, white here might be slightly better, but for sure he's not preparing this that deep, or that, I mean, the depth will be not that huge in comparison to d takes e4, and it's a very simple position. I mean, very practical. You go e6, knight bd7, bishop e7, or bishop d6, whatever, and you castle, and you have no problem. You miss your light squares bishop, but your pawns are covering that. I mean, light squares, so light squares is covered here, light squares is covered here, it's covered here, and will be covered here as well. So you're completely covered on light squares, and your dark squares will be covered by your bishop. I hope you like this. I know that some of the structures or some of the lines we did not cover, but I do believe after this knowledge, your Caro-Kann career might get started. And again, I advise you, really advise you to try the Caro-Kann, because it's a kind of a smart combination between very solid position and fighting to win, as we started our mini lecture, as I said. If you find it useful, share and subscribe. And you can check out, we discussed Reti before, we discussed probably Queen's Gambit accepted, we discussed some openings, and let me in the comment what do you want to see next, what you are interested in, or especially in the Caro-Kann, if you want something in more details, let me know, and hopefully we'll share in the very near future. Thank you again, see you soon.